They're jeans, but so much better. These are the Metro pull-on pants by Sinclair Patterns. They're made of denim and they have all the classic top stitching of traditional jeans, but they have a stretchable waistband so you can pull these pants on. The stretch denim that I'm using in this video is from Rex Fabrics. It's a high-quality denim material that was very easy to sew with. For this pattern, you want to make sure that your material has a healthy spandex content. If you're not sure if the fabric that you're using has enough stretchability for the waistband, I would err on the side of using a complementary color athletic knit and cut out those pieces just using the included front and back waistband pattern pieces. In addition to the sew along today, I'm also hosting a giveaway for a $10 Sinclair Patterns gift card. Stay tuned to the end of the video for more details on the giveaway. For now, let's get started sewing the comfiest pair of jeans in your wardrobe. Place your yoke piece right sides together with its corresponding back pant piece and pin in place. Sew this seam with a stretch stitch and a 5/8 inch seam allowance and then finish the raw edges. Repeat for both sets of yoke and back pant legs and then press those seams downward. Then working from the right side of the back pant, we're going to top stitch along that bottom yoke seam. You could top stitch once, just edge stitching along the bottom of that seam line, or you can choose to add an additional row of top stitching 1/4 inch below the seam line. Use your preferred stretch stitch and do this for both back pant legs. Take your back pockets to the ironing board and fold and press the top edge to the wrong side by 1/2 inch, and then again by another 1/2 inch. And once that's pressed, we'll work again from the right side of the fabric to top stitch the top of the pocket twice. First edge stitching close to that upper fold, and then stitching once again 1/4 inch below the upper fold. And do this for both back pockets. Now I'll transfer the decorative top stitching lines from the pattern piece onto the back pocket. And I went over those lines once more with tailor chalk. Do this for both back pockets, then take these pockets to your sewing machine and top stitch right over those stitching lines with a longer straight stitch of about 3 to 4 millimeters. Now you can finish the side and bottom edges for both pockets. Take the pockets back to the ironing board and press the side and bottom edges to the wrong side by 5/8 inch. Now we're ready to attach the pockets to the back pant pieces. I've transferred the pocket marking at the top of my back pant piece just using pins. Now I'll align the top edge of my pockets with that marking and pin in place along the side and bottom edges. And repeat for both back pockets. Now I'll edge stitch those pockets in place along the side and bottom edges with a long straight stitch of about 3 to 4 millimeters. Then on the top inside corners of each pocket, we're going to trim those seam allowances for both pockets. Then we'll finish off these back pockets with another row of top stitching about 1/4 inch away from those side edges, as well as about 1/4 inch long bar tack along both top edges. Here is the wrong side of one of my front pant pieces. I'm going to take a scrap piece of interfacing, about 1 inch by 1 inch, and fuse it right along the area at the bottom of the fly, doing this for both front pant pieces. Now on the wrong side of one of your front pant pieces, transfer that fly front stitching line. Then we'll place both front pant pieces right sides together and pin in place along that front curved seam. Sew along your stitching line with a regular straight stitch, then reinforce that seam by sewing once again within the seam allowance right next to the original stitching line. Now we're going to clip into the seam allowance just below this fly extension. And then we can finish the edges of that fly extension and the remainder of the crotch seam. And then we'll open out the front pant pieces away from each other. And from the wrong side of the fabric, we'll press this fly piece to the left. Once it's pressed, pin the fly in place from the right side. Now we're going to create a top stitching line, extending an inch away from that center front seam and making sure that your stitching line will catch that fly extension. And you can feel through your fabric where that fly extension begins to curve to the center seam and follow that curve with your transferring tool. Then we can go to the sewing machine and top stitch along our stitching line, then top stitch once again 1/4 of an inch within that stitching line. Then we're going to top stitch the entire front crotch seam, from the top to the bottom of the crotch. We're just going to edge stitch from top to bottom, catching that seam as we go. And then we're going to do a second row of top stitching 1/4 of an inch away from the seam, once again catching that fly and seam allowance as you go. Cut 2 pieces of 1 inch wide interfacing to mimic the curved opening for your pockets and fuse them in place. Turn your front pant piece to the right side, and then place your pocket lining and the pants right sides together, and pin in place along the curved edge. Sew in place with a 5/8 inch seam allowance using your preferred stretch stitch. Then trim those seam allowances and clip into the curves. Turn the pockets over the seam allowance to the inside of the pant and give those pocket seams a good press. And then we'll top stitch those pressed edges as we've been doing, first edge stitching and then top stitching again at 1/4 of an inch. Then we'll turn the front pant to the wrong side and align the front pocket facing and the lining right sides together and pin in place along the side and bottom edges. Then sew the pocket and the lining pieces together as pinned with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and finish the raw edges. Then pin the top and side edges of the pocket to the top and side edges of the pant. And baste those edges in place. Place your back pant pieces right sides together and pin along the back curved seam. Sew this curved seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and then sew once again within the seam allowance very close to that 5/8 of an inch stitching line and then finish those raw edges. And press that seam allowance toward the left as worn. Now with that seam allowance pressed toward the left side, we're going to top stitch the seam allowance down, edge stitching very close to the original curved seam line. Place your front and back pant pieces right sides together. And matching the notches, we're going to pin that inner leg seam. Now sew the inner leg seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges and press them toward the back pant. Now with that seam allowance pressed toward the back leg, we're going to top stitch that back leg to its seam allowance, edge stitching close to that inner leg seam from the bottom of one pant leg, straight across that center crotch seam to the bottom of the opposite pant leg. We're doing this in one continuous stitching line with about a 3 to 4 millimeter stitch length. Now I'll place my front and back pant leg right sides together, and matching the notches, I'll pin from the top to the bottom. And do the same for the opposite side seam. And then sew both side seams from the top to the bottom with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then finish those raw edges. Apply stretchable, fusible interfacing to the wrong sides of your front and back waistband pieces, and then place these pieces right sides together and pin the side seams. And repeat for your uninterfaced front and back waistband pieces. Sew these seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Then we'll place our waistband pieces right sides together and pin along the top edge. And then sew all around that top edge with a 5/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch. Now open out the waistband pieces away from each other and press your seam toward the uninterfaced waistband all the way around. Once that seam is pressed toward the uninterfaced waistband, we're going to understitch. We're going to sew the uninterfaced waistband to the seam allowance, once again using a stretch stitch and sewing close to that original seam line. Now fold that waistband along the top seam line, wrong sides together, and press it so that the top edge of that inner waistband is slightly to the inside and not visible from the outside. Now place the waistband on the top of the pants right sides together, matching your seams and your notches. And pin in place all the way around. Sew the waistband to the pant all the way around with a 5/8 inch seam allowance using a stretch stitch, and then finish the raw edges. Press those finished seam allowances down toward the bottom of the pants, and then if you like, you can add a row of top stitching right below the waistband, stitching the top of the pant to the seam allowance on the inside, all the way around the top of the pant, once again using a stretch stitch. To hem the bottom of the pants, turn the raw edges to the wrong side twice, a 1/2 inch both times, and giving that a good press. And then I'm choosing to edge stitch close to that upper fold all the way around, doing this for the bottom of both pant legs. And now your pull-on jeans are complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out the rest of my video library for more great sewing inspiration. And if you're interested in entering to win the $10 gift card to Sinclair Patterns, leave a comment below just telling me your favorite style of pants to wear. This giveaway will run from today, January 19, 2024, 12 p.m. Eastern, to next Friday, January 26, 2024 at 12 p.m. Eastern. The winner will be announced in the video description as well as in my YouTube community. This giveaway is not sponsored by YouTube, and So Happy is solely responsible for choosing the winner and giving out the gift card. I hope you enter, and I'll see you in the next video.